On July 21, 1861, the first major battle of the American Civil War began with an illusion still hanging over both capitals. Many people in Washington believed one hard march toward Manassas might break Confederate confidence and open the road to Richmond. Some civilians even rode out with food, carriages, and field glasses, treating the campaign as if the rebellion could be watched from a safe ridge. But near a creek called Bull Run, in summer heat and dust, citizen soldiers discovered that courage and uniforms were not the same as an army. The Union commander Irvin McDowell was under pressure to act before short-term enlistments expired. His army was large on paper, but many regiments were new, slow, and unused to marching together. The plan was to demonstrate near the stone bridge while a stronger column swung around the Confederate left, crossed at Sudley Springs, and rolled up the line near Manassas Junction. The idea made sense because the railroad junction mattered. It tied northern Virginia to the Shenandoah Valley and let Confederate forces shift faster than a marching army could. Across Bull Run, P.G.T. Beauregard held a Confederate line that was also imperfect, tired, and uncertain. Joseph E. Johnston's troops from the Shenandoah Valley were moving toward the field, and the ability to reinforce by rail would become one of the battle's decisive facts. This was not yet the trench war or mass slaughter that later Americans would know. It was a battle of roads, fields, fences, bridges, green troops, mixed uniforms, and officers trying to read a battlefield through smoke. The surviving evidence also gives the battle a useful context. Bull Run was not only a clash of bravery, but a test of how young armies turned political claims into practical control. Contemporary accounts, maps, and later battlefield records point to the same cause and effect pattern. Officers could issue plans, but roads, heat, enlistment pressure, and the railroad decided how much of those plans could survive contact with the field. That is why the battle's record feels less like a simple upset than a warning about institutions that had not yet learned to wage a continental war. McDowell's flanking march began before dawn, but delays quickly weakened the design. Columns took longer than expected, men stopped for water, roads narrowed. By the time Union troops crossed at Sudley Springs and pushed toward Matthews Hill, surprise had thinned. Still, the Federal attack hit hard. Confederate units bent backward, commanders tried to steady the line, and for a time the Union advance looked like the beginning of victory. The problem was that victory had to be organized faster than confusion could spread. The fight shifted toward Henry Hill. There, the Henry House, the open crest, and the nearby roads became the hinge of the day. Union batteries under James Ricketts and Charles Griffin moved forward, hoping artillery would hold the hill and break Confederate resistance. But guns need infantry protection. In smoke and noise, with regiments wearing colors that did not always clearly separate friend from enemy, the batteries became exposed prizes. Orders were misunderstood. Units advanced, halted, and fired at uncertain targets. A battle that had seemed to have direction became a series of local emergencies. Near the crest, Thomas Jackson's Virginia brigade held firm enough to give the Confederate defense a rallying point. The nickname Stonewall came out of that moment and later became legend, but the larger point was practical. A line that holds gives other troops somewhere to gather. Johnston's arriving reinforcements and Beauregard's efforts to restore order turned scattered resistance into a counterattack. Fresh Confederate units pressed against Union soldiers who had been marching and fighting for hours. The Federal line did not vanish at once. It unraveled. Some regiments withdrew in order, others lost formation. More troops on the road saw movement to the rear and interpreted it as a sign that the battle was lost. Once confidence broke, retreat became contagious. The roads back toward Centerville filled with soldiers, ambulances, artillery, supply wagons, and civilians who had come expecting spectacle. At Cub Run, congestion and fear turned withdrawal into the image remembered as a rout. Confederate victory at Bull Run was real, but it was not a clean strategic triumph. Southern forces were too exhausted and disorganized to capture Washington. Northern defeat was also not the end of the Union cause. Instead, the battle changed the scale of the war. Abraham Lincoln and his government moved toward larger armies, longer enlistments, and commanders who would have to build discipline over time. McDowell paid the immediate price, but the deeper failure belonged to a country that had imagined civil war could be short because it wanted it to be short. Bull Run matters because it punished illusion. The battlefield showed that railroads, roads, timing, staff work, ammunition, clear uniforms, disciplined retreats, and experienced command all mattered as much as speeches about bravery. It revealed that both sides had men willing to fight, and neither side yet had the military system needed to end the conflict quickly. Its aftermath became a lesson in scale. The Union would call for more men, the Confederacy would learn that victory did not equal strategic decision, and historians would later treat the rout as the moment the myth of a quick settlement broke against evidence. By nightfall on July 21st, the picnic war fantasy had collapsed. The United States and the Confederacy were no longer testing whether one battle could settle the argument. They were entering the long war they had not yet been willing to imagine.